The Chinese diasporas overseas actually were not only transferring knowledge, technologies, ideas, but also actually becoming potential investors into their homeland. The key factor which is conducive to a diaspora contributing positively and constructively was their ability to mobilize, for example, the existence of social capital or networks that link diaspora members to each other through formal or informal associations. There are certain Pakistanis who are very much in touch back home. They go once or twice a year. They have their families. They even have, either economic investments. They have sister companies, or they have philanthropic projects. In Karachi, for example, a lot of medical facilities, eye camps are being sponsored. I know doctors have been doing that. And then you have others who have not visited Pakistan for 30 years. So I know this very nice doctor in Cleveland who actually messages me and sends me a lot of videos and his research. And when I asked him when was he there the last time, he has not been to Pakistan for more than 30 years.
Hi everyone, I'm Nauraiz Rana and I'm back on New Wave Global. We have with us Raza Rumi, and we'll continue our discussion that we left in the previous session about the diaspora and how they can contribute and what their roles and challenges are. So before we begin, let's take a broader holistic overview. So Raza, what do you think? How can diaspora contribute? How have the diasporas, the networks, how have they evolved over the last few decades? With the influx of so many global changes happening at the same time, so easy to commute. Now, second generation citizens in the US and Europe growing up. What do you think? Where do they stand? Where do we stand?
Yeah. So, Nauraiz, I think I've already mentioned to you that, almost a decade ago, in fact, a bit more than a decade, actually, when I used to work for the Asian Development Bank. One of my colleagues was retiring, and he had commissioned, these essays and a whole knowledge product, in the form of a book. And it was, handed over to me, or rather dumped on me, because that's how bureaucracies work, that, since I'm taking some of his work, so I'll be editing that. And, that particular publication was, it was called Converting Migration Drains into Gains, harnessing the resources of overseas professionals. So at that time, I was a diaspora, but I wasn't really. I was in the Philippines and working for this large, multilateral institution, but not diasporic in identity. So at that time, I did my usual bit. Edited, read, made changes, got it published, got it launched, etc., etc. But then, I've been going back and I've been thinking, and what I learned from there, and that's why reading, is so vital, that, things stay with you. And, so the book looked at a couple of case studies. So one, and amongst the case studies were China, the Philippines, in the main. And what I remembered that, how the Chinese, economic miracle, as we call it, with the, reduction of poverty and high economic growth rates. So prior to that, something very interesting was happening, that the Chinese diasporas overseas were actually into knowledge transfer, were not only transferring knowledge, technologies, ideas, but also actually becoming potential investors into their homeland. Or, and many of them actually, after China's sort of, what you call, economic miracle, some of them even went back to their home country. And basically that knowledge transfer, that stayed with me. And I went back to the book. Of course, some of the data there is dated, which I thought that, another study would be very important. But, what I learned and what I remember from that particular, understanding is that, the key factor which is conducive to a diaspora contributing positively and constructively was their ability to mobilize, which is for example, the existence of social capital or networks that link diaspora members to each other through formal or informal associations. And of course, the second most important was that, the opportunity structures, which are policies and incentives in the home and host country, and the opportunities to develop skills and knowledge, and intermediary organizations that would actually help harness that expertise back to the home country. And the third, of course, was the motivations in terms of deriving from opportunity structures and migrants' own interests in expressing their identity, perhaps as they sought, prestige or economic benefits. So in a way, social capital and diasporic organization emerged as the most important factor, for them to become, effective contributors back home and even to the host country. So, we do have some examples here, like this doctor's big organization called APNA, which is a North American medical practitioners, big, huge network, and with mixed results, of course. Some things they've done really well, others not so well. But yeah, I mean, that's my understanding that, learning from the Chinese, learning from Vietnam, learning from the Philippines, there are many examples where diasporas have become really important catalysts of economic and social change back home.
Absolutely. And I think we've had this discussion separately as well. And we spoke about how it was during the same time when China opened up its economy in the late 1960s. And then it's a definite, like, we all know the story, like the boom the success that they accrued post opening up the economy, and then realizing all the success that comes along with global trade. The diaspora had a huge influence, and both in terms of knowledge, both in terms of monetary influence as well, which led to the Chinese government being open to the idea of actually accepting that change.
Yeah, they were actually, because the Communist Party was wedded to the idea of a planned economy, a closed economy, so some of them were influential in even convincing, members or officials of the Communist Party that how China has to take advantage of, international trade and opening up their economy and private investment from these people overseas,
Absolutely.
Structural shift.
Absolutely. And then automatically it's very much neutralizes the problems and issues that a country faces due to brain drain, and that is a very well-known economic concept. And harnessing the brain power and then bringing it back and being receptive and being open to the ideas, to the knowledge, to the investments that the diaspora come with. I think it can have multifold many, I think, successes for the country. So on that note, speaking of brain drain and speaking of diaspora and issues, let's pivot the discussion a bit more towards the Pakistani diaspora in the US. I mean, there's huge potential. We've known individually, they're like individuals who are ranked at the very top of their field. Atmia, for example, he's ranked as one of the world's leading economists. However, as a society, as a community, we've may not have been able to develop that strong kind of how would you say that power, that diasporic power that other diaspora nations have. So what do you think? Where do the Pakistanis in US, where do they stand? What is their status?
I think of course, I mean, almost nearly, I mean, the numbers are not really reliable, but hundreds and thousands of Pakistanis of Americans of Pakistani descent live here in the US. Some people even once said 500,000. But the thing is that, most of them, unlike Europe or the Middle East, are professionals. In Europe and in the Middle East, a lot of working class migrants, have been historically going there. Of course, I mean, one cannot generalize, but the case in the United States is very different because here you have really high quality professionals. So first of all, as you rightly said, the top of the industry, top of their profession. So that's the first distinctive feature. But the problem, and I'll come straight to the point, is that how well organized they are. As I mentioned earlier, social capital or the kind of networks they have, are they effective? Are they organized enough to harness and mobilize the knowledge gains that you were referring to earlier, and they're not. Unfortunately, they're, first of all, as we know, the our diaspora. I mean, I'm sure other diasporas do the same, but they, when they're abroad, they replicate and try and reproduce all the divisions that exist in the home country. So what kind of divisions we have. We have the ethnic, the first ethnic marker. I'm from Punjab and you are from this, or you are from, and there's linguistic, religious as well. Atif Mia's case is a clear case of religious discrimination, right?
Absolutely.
So, and back home, I mean, he was tipped as one of the economic advisors, but then he couldn't become
That
one.
was very, very unfortunate incident. Yes.
Exactly, exactly. And then, of course, you have now increasingly the political polarization. So, X party and Y party. And the thing is that, what is really important for the diasporic communities is that those divisions which exist in home country, which are natural products of the societal conditions and economic conditions and social imperatives, they cannot be valid in a totally different setting. I mean, who cares whether what language do I speak to you when we are talking in our about Pakistan, whether I'm speaking Urdu or Pashto or Punjabi or English? I mean, nobody really cares, But or even, I mean, in the UK, when I was a student, I even noticed how the caste, the biradari system, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you're a Rana, and the Ranas have their own network, and the Sayyads have their own network, and so, I mean, similar, I'm sure, exists here as well. But I think that's the first thing, is that, and of course it's an idealistic thing. I'm saying it's never 100% possible, but how to forge a larger identity. And I think that identity is not just Pakistani, because when you are here, then it becomes a broader South Asian identity. Because you have people from India and Bangladesh and Nepal. One factoid, that more students from Nepal have been coming into the United States in recent years, over the past decade, than Pakistani students, right? And it's a much smaller country. But you have a huge, thriving Bangladeshi American community, right? And yes, we have so many historical fault lines with them. But, when you're in the US, you also operate along the...
they tend to dissipate, actually. Like when you're interacting with people from India, with Bangladesh, those international lines tend to dissipate. But unfortunately, within Pakistanis, we tend to mimic the same polarization that tends to exist in Pakistan.
So if you were to draw concentric circles, you would have at the core the Pakistani thing, and then you have the South Asian identity, and perhaps for some, and of course, not all South Asians are Muslim, but then there's also a larger Muslim question in the United States, which is, and in Europe, which is currently being debated. So you also intersect with that path, right? And if you were to take the circle more broadly and draw another one, then you fall into the larger concerns and struggles of the minority groups in the United States. Now, this we'll talk at a separate stage. I don't want to complicate our discussion, but certainly, the Pakistani and the South Asian immigrants or the diasporic communities do have at least I have an affinity with the Hispanic population here in the US, with the Black Americans, with other communities, Native Americans, that are considered minority communities, right? So in terms of their social and political and other organization, there is a clear intersection. But anyway, going back to Pakistan, I think that is the network, formal associations. So we have a lot of informal associations. They're very regional, they're very localized. I've for the past 7-8 years, I've traveled across the US, because Pakistani communities have been inviting me, from Texas and California and Florida and Nevada and this and that, and and the thing is, yes, they are very thriving. They all are informal networks, and they meet up, and they have their local mosque. I mean, the Muslims especially, they're very invested in that. But I think beyond that, other than Apna, I do not really think of a network that has that kind of an impact both here and there as Pakistan, right?
Pakistan, yes,
Or
absolutely.
larger South Asia. So I think that's the biggest weakness, biggest constraint that we face here, and I think that has to be fixed.
Okay. So, like you said, actually, one question that came to my mind. Like you said, we tend to mimic the polarization, the divisiveness that we have in Pakistan, despite the fact that this is a different environment. Here, we do not have the same power dynamics. The hegemony over one caste of the other it's just not applicable in the context when you're outside of Pakistan. But similarly, do you think, in terms of other areas, education, for example, how we have the literacy in Pakistan, how people tend to work across, their sectoral discrepancies in terms of white collar jobs, blue collar jobs, and low skill jobs. Do you feel the same that is the same thing happening in the US, or would you say it is different? Like the generation in the US, they are, I would say, they qualify for more highly skilled jobs, or
Yeah, you mean the second generation
the
of
first generation as well as the second generation, because a lot of the first generation people that we come across, they came at an age where immigrating to the US was easier
yeah.
back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. So, probably they set up their businesses, but I'm talking about intellectual depth. We're well aware of, industry experts, we academics who are creme de la creme, who are at the top. But I'm talking about tier two, tier three, tier four, other individuals who make the major population of Pakistanis residing in the US.
So I think there are of course mixed trends. Nauraiz, I mean, there are certain Pakistanis who are very much in touch back home. They go once or twice a year. They have their families. They even have their either economic investments. They have sister companies, or they have philanthropic projects. In Karachi, for example, a lot of medical facilities, eye camps are being sponsored. I know doctors have been doing that, and then you have others who have not visited Pakistan for 30 years. So I know this very nice doctor in Cleveland who actually messages me and sends me a lot of, videos and his research. And when I asked him when was he there the last time, he has not been to Pakistan for more than 30 years. So obviously his understanding of Pakistan and the way it has changed and shifted, and as you also visit frequently, I mean, Pakistan is a very dynamic society. Pakistan is not a static country that can be boxed in one frame.
Yeah.
The country is blowing up, or it is, because it's a very diverse and complicated
Yeah.
place. 214 million people.
Yeah.
It's the fifth most populous country in the world.
Yeah.
It has all these different ethnic groups. It has all these different social groups. It has a clear sense of, women, young people, the marginalized sections of the society speaking up and
Yeah.
pushing for change. You see
Absolutely.
that energy when you go there. And then, of course, we bemoan all things that are wrong with Pakistan, and, we get depressed and we talk about them. But at the end of the day, if you were to look at the net impression that I get always when in recent years, I've started to go back more frequently. For many years, I did not because of peculiar circumstances. But I have realized that, each time I go there, it's a different place. And for some for good reasons, some for bad reasons.
Yeah.
But I think what is the most important part is that whether the diaspora here has that full understanding, I don't really think so. I think they also need to know more about, and one purpose of why we are holding this conversation and have created this particular public facing forum is to actually engage with the Pakistani Americans and attempt to at least better inform them, or give them a variety of perspectives.
Yeah.
So I think my very raw thoughts are that there's so much that can be done. I think the first important imperative is to have a directory of all these networks. If you were to go online and find, as Shoja Nawaz of the former director of Atlantic Council said in a meeting where both of us were present for a few weeks ago in DC, that you don't even have a directory. You can't.
Yeah.
You go online and you won't be able to find even the full list of how many such associations exist. So I think one is, of course, that. but that's a rudimentary starting point. I think where we have a very clear-cut, potential and urgency of intervention and collaboration and networking, knowledge transfer per se has to do with the most urgent and pressing issue of Pakistan. Two interrelated issues. Where one is, of course, the economy of Pakistan, which is a sinking.
It's on the rails. It's basically on the rails. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other is the climate. The climate change that an average Pakistani is facing and experiencing every year, every day, every month. It's a vulnerable country, and the floods in 2022 and the disasters before that, and all other scientific studies are showing and demonstrating that Pakistanis are at the receiving end, and until they don't adapt. And for that, there are all these areas of clean energy, renewables, investments in that sector, which a lot of Pakistani diaspora, know about. And with the economy, of course, more trade, more cooperation in sectors such as technology and other areas. I think that is where proper forging of those linkages. I mean, some do exist at individual level. There are many businessmen who are doing business, but how do we create a more organized engagement on both sides? And of course, for that, the home country also needs to fix its policies and the business environment. But I think something that we should be talking about, in the weeks to come, is how can the investment within Pakistan, mobilized from overseas, in which areas, which sectors, which subsectors, it can actually target and create the kind of economic change that Pakistan desperately needs. So I guess it was great talking to you as always.
Yeah. No, likewise, and I'm sure we'll have much more interesting things to talk about.
Yes.
In the future.
So please do like this video and share it, and do subscribe to this channel, because your support, only with your support, we'll be able to make a bigger impact. Goodbye.
Absolutely. All right. Goodbye.